I thank the Speaker and I thank the gentleman from Texas and wish him well and a very Merry Christmas with his family and safe travels home. And I too share his affinity for wanting to work across the aisle. I've done so on numerous occasions. I'm fairly well known for speaking my mind on the House floor, but happy to work across the aisle, and also an equal opportunity basher of both sides when I disagree. But I wish we would have vigorous debate here on the floor of the House. A lot of the things that the gentleman from Texas talked about, I agree wholeheartedly. The immigrants he discussed wanting to come to the United States, I'd like them to have safe passage under our rules and under our laws. Right now we have a broken system that is endangering lives of immigrants, endangering the lives of Americans. We talked about the ideals and the values of this country, and I share those ideals and values. And I would ask and inquire of my colleagues in the body broadly, how can we maintain those ideals if we're bankrupt? How can we maintain those ideals if we're writing checks we can't cash? I can give speech after speech after speech about this topic, but unless we change our ways on both sides of the aisle, this country will not survive. I don't know what it's going to take to get the people who are entrusted to run this country, and that starts in this chamber, the power of the purse entrusted to the people's house. We are abusing it. We are conducting our duties irresponsibly, both sides of the aisle. Today, the United States Senate, supposedly the, quote, upper chamber, the House of Lords in the United States, if you will, sent us, or is in the process of sending us after voting for it, a 4,155-page bill unveiled yesterday morning at 1:30 a.m. that will cost $1.7 trillion. This bill will increase spending, $118 billion. This bill has $45 billion for the country of Ukraine. 21% over President Biden's request, by the way. $40 billion for disaster relief. $15 billion for 7,234 earmarks. With the senior senator of Alabama, Richard Shelby, walking out of the Senate with a legacy of $670 million. I believe the senior senator said that monuments are from pigeons and dogs in response to my criticism. Well, there's a lot of stuff in your name in Alabama, and you just got some more, Senator Shelby. Is that what this is about? Because who's paying for that? He's not paying for it. Our kids and grandkids are paying for it. You know what else we're paying for? We are paying for $500,000 to the Long Island Gay and Lesbian Youth Incorporated, $113,000 to the LGBT Center of Greater Reading, Pennsylvania, $1.5 million for the Loft LGBTQ Community Center New Home Project in New York, which I got excoriated as somehow being hateful for tweeting that out earlier by one of my colleagues. Now, hold on a second. So I'm hateful for raising whether or not we should have $1.5 million set aside for a loft community center in New York that is then divvied up by both age and sexual identity or preference. Okay, I'm the bad guy for thinking that maybe taxpayers are thinking, why are we doing that? $750,000 for New York-based In Our Own Voices, Inc., which aims to strengthen the voices of LGBT people of color and increase their capacity for combating oppression and marginalization. $250,000 to support Wisconsin's first-in-the-nation gay rights law book and archive. How about the climate agenda? $1.3 million for workforce development activities at a climate change education center in the Los Angeles Community College District. $3 million for clean energy workforce development at the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. $200,000 for the Rhode Island AFL-CIO's Climate Jobs Workforce Training Initiative. $875,000 for green energy on demand at Clarkson University. $400,000 for the placement of at-risk young adults into the green jobs industry. $2 million for community-driven air quality environmental justice assessment at the University of Illinois. $2 million for a climate change impact on water initiative at Texas State University. I represent Texas State University, and that's garbage. Why are we doing this? $10 million for the state of Hawaii's zero-emission bus program. $1.6 million for the Center for Wind Energy at UT Dallas. Texas is pretty well represented with all these earmarks. Inequality and equity. The Omni funds pointless equity initiatives and subsidies even more radical ideologies, such as $1.5 million for equity and ecosystem health through water column development. $2.25 million for the Shoreline Equity and Adaptation Hub. $750,000 for the acquisition of a building in Brooklyn, New York to create the Brooklyn Center for Social Justice, Entrepreneurship, and the Arts. $300,000 for the City of Sacramento's Neighborhood Equity Initiative. $477,000 for the Equity Institute's Teacher Professional Development. How about racial wokeness? A few examples. $443,000 for the Racial Justice Improvement Project at Montgomery County DA's office. $1 million for the Penumbra Theater in St. Paul, Minnesota to develop and implement a curriculum for racial healing and equity training. $1 million for $800,000 for economic development for black communities in Colorado, $750,000 for a minority-owned small business emergency assistance program in Seattle. I could go on and on and on for all of the things that are put in here, divvying us up by race, divvying us up by gender ideology, all of those earmarks just flooding out with money we don't have. But that's not even the worst of it. That's not even the actual irresponsibility of this body. That's just pork spending that this body is used to doing to the tune of $15, $16 billion. The real problem is that we are funding a whole alphabet soup of federal agencies that are demonstrably not doing their job, but more importantly, are demonstrably targeting the American people. The Department of Homeland Security is getting $3.2 billion more with no policy changes required, and in fact, unbelievably, with restrictions on how that money can be used. It may not be used for security. It may only be used for processing more people. That is what our Democratic colleagues, and unfortunately, a sizable block of Republicans, believe is a good use of your taxpayer money. Hey, guys, the Department of Homeland Security is doing such a crack job of securing the homeland. They're doing such a great job at the border. Hey, let's give them some more money to not secure the border, and let's restrict it from being able to be used to do any of the security that the line Border Patrol agents actually want to do their job. There you go. That's what you got. And what happened in the Senate today? What happened in the Senate today? I'll tell you what happened in the Senate today. Blunt, Boozman, Capito, Collins, Cornyn, Cotton, Graham, Inhofe, McConnell, Moran, Murkowski, Portman, Romney, Rounds, Shelby, Thune, Wicker, and Young. 18 Republicans who campaign on fiscal responsibility, who campaign on securing the border, who campaign on balancing the budget, who campaign against the swamp, who run commercials saying they're going to change this place, did the swampiest thing you can possibly do, and that is to vote for a 4,100-page bill they got just yesterday, not knowing remotely what all is in the bill because it was cooked up behind closed doors with no appropriation meetings, jamming it over a new House Republican majority, doing it intentionally to prevent us from being able to debate and vote on how we're going to fund Ukraine, how we're going to fund our own national defense, how we're going to fund non-defense discretionary spending, and ensure that we use that money to secure the border of the United States. That is what your Republican senators, those 18, did to you, America. Remember it. Remember it when Republicans going around thumping their chest, talking about changing this town when they are neck deep drowning in the swamp. When they are emblematic of everything wrong with the swamp. Remember it. Remember it. I don't like saying it. I've got friends on both sides of the aisle, and some of these 18 are my friends. But you know what? John Adams and Thomas Jefferson had a pretty testy relationship because they fought over the way this country should be run and be set up. We are hired to fight for the people we represent. So I'll be damned if I'm going to give a rat's rear end whether I offend some of the people in this godforsaken town because I dare question, regardless of which party they are in, regardless of who they say they're friends with or who they campaign with. I'll be darned if I'm going to be cowed into not calling out what you see unfold before you with your very eyes. Leader Mitch McConnell called the bill, quote, a strong outcome for Republicans. The arguments that I've heard from some of the members include this argument. Having lost the vote for a continuing resolution until the new Republican majority takes over in January, we had two bad choices: cast a protest vote against funding our military, veterans, and Border Patrol and other essential government functions, or vote for a flawed bill. That is what happens in this town. This was a setup, ladies and gentlemen. It was purposeful, well orchestrated by Mitch McConnell. I do not question that. He's good at playing these games in this town, as are virtually everybody associated with the appropriations process and leadership of the House and the Senate. Oh, they've got all the excuses in the world. Oh, there's a troop pay raise. There's a helicopter that we need to buy. There are missiles we need to buy. There are boats and planes we need to buy. So because of that, we must cast a vote for a flawed bill rather than, quote, a protest vote. A protest vote? What, it's a protest vote? So my vote, which I will cast whenever we get this monstrosity finally sent over here, whenever the Rules Committee goes through their sham process, and it's a sham process, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, they'll entertain some amendments, and they'll give some perfunctory, oh, let's review it. They'll kick it down here to the floor. There will be no debate, no amendments offered. It will be jammed through because every one of the people in this chamber, both sides of the aisle, maybe not everyone, the vast majority, oh, they want to get on their jets and get home for Christmas. You should have seen the wailing and gnashing of teeth last night when Mike Lee was offering an amendment over in the Senate to try to address the expiration of Title 42 and what is going to occur if the Supreme Court lifts its stay. And what is going to happen to Texas, what is going to happen to the United States, what is going to happen to migrants, the empowerment of cartels, the fentanyl pouring into our country. Mike Lee dared to try to do something about that. Oh, and you should have seen the wailing and gnashing of teeth. Well, what are you going to do? We don't want to be here till Christmas. Why don't you tell that to George Washington and the boys crossing the Delaware in 1776, or the boys in Bastogne in 1944? What were they doing on Christmas? Were they trying to fly out of the nation's capital in their jets back to their homes around their warm fireplaces so they could be with their families after they absolutely just royally screwed the country and their kids and grandkids? Because that's what they just did. That's what this body, this House chamber, the people's house is going to do tomorrow morning. $600 million more for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, while doing nothing to stop it from colluding with big tech, targeting parents, or harassing pro-lifers, all of which the FBI is doing as we speak. Oh, it's better than that, ladies and gentlemen across the country. They're getting a brand new headquarters. And you want to know what almost derailed this lovely $1.7 trillion piece of legislation? A fight over where to put the fancy new FBI headquarters. Oh, these are the important things we do here in this city. Let's figure out who can get their pork back home in the form of a massive federal agency that is involved on a daily basis in targeting the American people in the name of law enforcement. That sounds like a winning prize for the people of either Maryland or Virginia. Let's grow this greater metropolitan area even more. What could do more for the people of the United States than to have a fancy new FBI headquarters filled with all sorts of people that are conspiring to target the American people and actually label a father as a domestic terrorist for daring to go to a school board meeting? By the way, the superintendent of that school system has been indicted. These are all the things that get just swept aside, just pushed to the corner. Nobody wants to talk about it. Where are my colleagues, by the way? I got an hour of debate time down here. Where is everybody? Hey, sipping on some eggnog with some whiskey and having some steak dinners or something? What is more important than sitting down here on the floor and highlighting the fraud being perpetrated on the American people right before our eyes? A complete and utter disastrous fraud endorsed by 18 Republican senators. I hope none of my Republican colleagues in this chamber, but we'll see. A bill that will fundamentally limit our ability to secure the border. It's actually in the dang bill. They don't even pretend anymore, ladies and gentlemen. They don't even try to hide it. They actually put the text in the bill that says this money cannot be used to secure the border of the United States. It can only be used to process people. That is in the text of this bill. Let me be clear to those 18 United States senators. That alone should have been enough to have you vote no on this bill, and yet you voted for it. It should have been enough that we're giving another $600 million to the FBI and building a new headquarters. It should have been enough that there's more money for ATF and all sorts of provisions to go after law-abiding gun owners. It should have been enough that there was $2.5 billion more for NIH, which funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan and pays Anthony Fauci's salary in perpetuity and hires CRT propaganda speakers. So I want to say again to those 18 Republican senators, you own this. You own every one of those earmarks that I listed and said in this speech. Every one of those earmarks that I put out in a tweet thread earlier, you own it. And you own it with the kind of reasoning that says, well, you vote for a flawed bill instead of casting a quote-unquote protest vote. It is not a protest vote to come to the chamber where you are hired by your constituents to fight for them and vote against the funding of the very tyranny you campaigned against.